Mike Ashton, how the heck are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. Can you hear me okay? Everything good?
Yes, sir.
All
Yep, I
right.
can hear you perfect.
You're wearing your Army West Point. So,
Of
welcome
course.
to another episode of Raise the Bar. I'm your host, Troy Haines, and tonight we are joined by Mike Ashton, who has been a couple time guest here on the podcast with us. He's got experience coaching the jumps, the pole vault. I think he probably is going to end up coaching just about everything from every time we talk. Seems like he's got the a good eye and good instincts, and you've traded up since the last time we talked, right? Last time you were still at Utah Valley, and now or Utah.
Yeah. I was at Utah Valley doing my thing, and then this last summer I got a call from a coach at West Point saying, "Hey, we're looking for a pole vault multis coach. Are you interested?" And I was like, "I'm not going to turn down a phone call from West Point." So
Right.
chatted with them, had a few interviews, and then went out there and accepted the job, and then moved my family from Utah all the way out to New York. So
Wow.
it's been a crazy kind of 7 8 months, but it's been good. It's been a lot of fun. West Point's been a very, I would say, like a very different experience than the normal college route, but it's been
Mhm.
really really awesome, and just I've been able to work with some really really great athletes so far, and it's been a good experience. I've learned like a ton just about the college level of coaching and recruiting and all the stuff that kind of goes into it.
Right.
Um, we have a really, really good head coach, Coach Mike Smith. He was at Kansas State for like 20 something years, and he's been here at West Point for 10. So he's got a lot of really great experience, and then some other great assistants that I work with that I've just learned and kind of tried to be a sponge as much as possible so that I can just continue to get better and better.
Absolutely. It sounds awesome. I'm curious. I think most people might think, military, right? So you're involved in the military. So I'd be like, when you say, "Hey guys, we're gonna line up and do these drills," yes, sir. Like let me jump
It's
right to that,
you
right?
know they're definitely more disciplined. Our head coach always says we don't have any knuckleheads on our team, which we don't. Um, the military side of West Point definitely takes care of that for us.
Uh-huh.
But I always like to remind recruits that they're typical 18, 19, 20, 21 year olds.
Yeah.
They're still track athletes, so they enjoy doing the sport. They still goof off just as much as any other pole vaulter or high jumper.
Right.
Um, but I think they've really taken to the idea of like time and a place.
Hmm.
So, they know when it's time to turn it on and when it's time to kind of relax. And, um, it's, I got a wide range of athletes from kind of all over the country, um, and just a lot of different experiences. And it's, uh, it's been pretty awesome. I lucked into a really, really awesome group, and we're putting things together and getting ready for a good outdoor season to come.
Awesome. So where are your duties falling mostly? Is it similar to where you were at Utah Valley? Were you're doing multis and vaults again, or how's it shaking out?
Yeah, so originally when I first got here, I was just doing pole vault and the multis at the time. Um, Obviously, I was doing high jump at UVU and was pretty bummed that I didn't get to do it. But I was like, hey, you never know what can happen. College, that's just how it goes. And um, yeah, one of our coaches, he took a job as a head coach out in California, and he was coaching high jump, and it was kind of my opportunity to say, hey, I'd love to take it. And so now I'm coaching high jump, pole vault, and the multis, kind of officially. But like you just said in the intro, I work with long jumpers and triple jumpers. I'm actually working with some of my multis that also do the 400 hurdles, and so I've done a lot of crash courses on 400 hurdle work and just
Right.
trying to learn as much as I can. And yeah, it's been kind of wild, but I've just enjoyed it. It's kept me really, really busy and kind of pushed me to the limit of, being able to coach, but I feel like we've been handling it pretty well. So,
Well, yeah, the proof's always in the pudding, right? You'll know when
mhm,
they start competing, how you're
exactly.
doing, right? And then no, it's I don't know. I keep thinking more and more, the last you and I were talking about before we got on the podcast about, do you really want to be a head guy? And I've done that job just a couple of times, and I am not, most people that know me would tell you I'm not a great administrator. So, the guy setting up the schedule and, making sure that everybody's going to get in the same place at the same time. Like I have trouble getting me to the same place every day. It's like, so getting in charge of a bunch of people and doing that, probably not my best skill set, but when it comes to the actual coaching, you know, that's the stuff that, we like to sink our teeth into because that's where it's,
Mm-hmm.
it's training and it's running and it's jumping and it's, a little bit of theory, a little bit of application, a lot of observation, right? A little trial and error,
Mm-hmm.
a little, I shameless plug out there. We changed the name of Sky High and Fly Jump Camps to, which I almost never do right from the very beginning. I'm not a big fan of even spending a whole week, at a time and doing one thing. So to Jump Labs because, or Sky High and Fly Jump Lab, because I always tell the kids, I go, well, we're here, we're experimenting. It's like I'm just kind of running my crazy scientist experiments on you to figure out, what's the best thing because every time I think I got this perfect playbook figured out, like, my guy, Jack Weissman, my crash course in somebody that's way too close to the bar. So I thought, I've got a visual library of all the stuff we did. I mean, I filmed that kid every day and I've kept them because I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, this is when we tried that thing. And, oh yeah, that was that thing. He kind of liked that one, I'm going through and I've tried that playbook on other kids who are too close to the bar. And it's like, nope, that doesn't work. I'm like, wait a minute. I thought I had it all figured out. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you really don't, so, but it's fun. Like you said, your different styles and whatever, like, I was going to mention this to you. I saw a guy pole vault just the other day, and of course it's on Instagram feed. So he's running down, nice plant, no drive knee. I did not see
Mm-hmm.
a lead knee drive up into the vault, which I always tell everybody, I'm like, it's just like the long jumper, it's just like the high jump. Like you got to jump. No, this guy, his leg stayed back,
Mm-hmm.
behind the lead leg. And, eventually it caught up, but he still compressed the pole, still swung up and through. And I could see it. I'm like, it's at least a 15 or 16-foot vault, And I saw my
Mm-hmm.
Steve Tully at Los Alamitos High School, Mike Tully's younger brother. And he had a kid just 2 years ago, I remember, that did the same thing, and I was like, what do you do with that? And he's like, yeah, he goes, I remember this guy from a couple of years ago that did that, and I'm like, I go, was he a pretty good vaulter? He's like, yeah. I was like, so it's weird. Like even, there's different schools of pole vaulting, as and I'm watching
Mm-hmm.
it from the ground up, just going, okay, I need to still, learn the sequence, step to
Yeah.
step. So
Yeah. I mean, every kid's just a little bit different, and you kind of talked about it with high jump, but it's kind of the same thing with pole vault of like, you see one thing and you're like, oh, I had this working with this athlete, and oh wait, what, this kid's a double leg swinger instead of just like a single leg swing, and you
yeah,
just kind of have to work with it. And I always tell the kids that I work with and that I'm coaching, like there are certain specific positions and things that we got to get to, but the way we get there, if you can do it in a certain way that works best for you, like I'm all for it.
yeah,
If it works in your brain and that's just how your body responds and your muscle memory works, but it's still putting the pieces together and giving us a good result, then
yeah,
we can roll with it. If it's not working, or if there's something that's causing us to get stuck, then we can rework it and try some different things and get into kind of that like experimental phase of like, okay, let's try this drill, let's try this technical piece, and if it
yeah,
works, great. If not, like we just keep reworking it. And I think not to age myself or put myself in the category of like the old man on the porch, like, it's just like there's a lot of these kids that are looking for that like instant fix of like, if I just do this drill and focus on it all the time, it's just going to instantly fix everything. And
right,
then I'm going to be good. And then they master that one thing. And it's like, they're like, why am I not jumping good yet? It's like, well, that's one piece of like the
right.
entire thing. we're
Yeah.
just setting ourselves up to be in the right position for the next piece that we got to work on.
Right.
And so patience is a thing I say every single day. I hear it in my sleep. And it's tough because these kids have 4 years of eligibility to do this thing, and then even at West Point, they don't get redshirt years. At West Point, it's 4 years and you're done.
Yeah.
And so it's once they get with us, we got to hit the ground running, and we do a lot of technical work through the fall just so that we can make sure that we're ready to go when we get into the season, and then it's
Yeah.
keeping pieces and things together. So, but yeah, patience, that it's tough, man. Some kids just pick things up really fast, and you're like, man, I wish that could happen to me. But
Right.
majority of the time, it's just going to take that constant effort and that constant repetition of good things before things start
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. I use an example. I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I try to sometimes I switch it one way or the other, but I attribute learning sometimes to similar to the frog in the water pot. So I go, there's
Mm,
sometimes you can take someone and you can say, okay, just shock value here. Like today I have a girl who's a single armor, and I taught her right from the beginning to get her elbow at least as high as her shoulder, as she's coming up through. But she has developed that to just kind of she gets it up there and then it just stops. And she's
mm,
pretty fast. I'm like, I want you to run that arm up and keep it going. Keep following it like it's a tracer bullet. Like up and that hasn't worked. So sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Mostly it hasn't. So
mm,
um, one of my other clients, a young lady up north, Kate, if you're listening, Kate Hemisath, she came to me one day and we were having a tough session. She wasn't really jumping very well, and I'm just kind of scratching my head, going, "Oh, this wasn't like the last time we were together." And her parents are from Fresno, so she had to take a
mm,
trip on holiday day to come down. So I stopped after, we're kind of hammering our head against the wall, and I said, is there anything that you want to work on, Kate? Because I know what I think I need to see, but is there anything that you want to do or try? And her face lit up and she goes, I really want to try to swing my arm around once and then up and through like that Australian gal that just won the world, Patterson.
mm,
And I'm like, what's her name? She goes, Paddington or something. And so I'm looking through my Instagram, Patterson. Oh yeah, I remember her. Okay. And I watched that arm go around and we worked the kinks out of it, tried a couple times. She didn't quite get it. And then she's a 5'3" high jumper now. And she was struggling at 4'6" in this workout. So I don't know if her legs were dead or what, but
mm.
whatever was happening wasn't clicking. So she comes around with the arm and goes right up and boom. And 5 or 6 inches of clearance. And I said, well, I don't know, but the early returns look pretty good. But it was
Yeah.
like, it was a shock value because it was something not totally different, but pretty different from what she'd been doing.
Mm,
And so I think sometimes if the shock is strong enough, or maybe you say, let's jump from the other side, or it's just got to be a huge change where you immediately go into learning a new technique and the brain can forget that there's another technique that's already stored in there. And
mm,
that's a difficult one because under pressure, what are you going to go back to? You can go back to what you've been doing the most.
yep.
Tiger Woods called them swing changes, right? So, and then the other thing that that I think is more likely, and here that was the frog that you throw them into the hot water pot and they jump right out, right? So they learn the water's hot, I'm out of here. The
Mm,
other one is the one that you trick them. You put them in lukewarm water and you gradually keep heating it up. And so that was your example. And this is the one that takes more patience.
yep.
That, you do something and you're like, hey, we need to cycle all the way through takeoff. I want your takeoff leg to cycle on the way up through. And you work on that, you work on it, you work on it. It gets a little better. Sometimes they still drag their foot on the ground. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it comes up and across. You're like, hey, that was just like Stephen Holm. Other times, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, that's getting pretty good. And it's like you said, and they go, well, how come I'm still not jumping any better? And I'm like, well, we're working so hard on that cycling. You're not getting your arms up,
Yeah.
so let's start working on that, and there's just those little tiny incremental changes, and then all of a sudden it all comes together, and that's a funny thing. I'd like to do that. Like, do you have an inkling when you're working with athletes? I never really asked anybody this. Somebody's asked me, but do you have an inkling when you're working with them when they're ready? for a breakthrough? Like, are there things that you look for? Sometimes you just kind of feel it coming?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that for me, kind of the cues are just like pop out things of, especially when we're working through approaches. I use like an intercept mark to help kids find their approaches. It's just kind of a baseline of like, I actually have this spreadsheet that I got, and it has a formula that puts in a lot of these different measurements of like their stride length, takeoff angle, distance away and along the bar. And it puts out, okay, from this mark, you're going to have 5 steps into your takeoff. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where you initiate your curve. You can do whatever you want from the back. And, when I shift kids over to that, the first couple of days, it's like they're getting the feel for it, they're getting the timing for it. And then there's just one jump where it like all comes together and you just see this pop off the ground and you're like, oh, that's it. Like that's what's gonna be our perfect takeoff in position, because it just looks really smooth, it looks really effortless, and they just get up in the air without even really trying or without great knee drive or arm drive.
Right.
And you're just like, okay, that's the one. That's the one we got to keep replicating, because if we can do that, then we can incorporate all the other pieces, and then it's all going to come together.
Right.
Um, in the technical side of things, once they're up in the air, um, when you see that the shoulder and the back over the bar by that much, but the hips just haven't fully
Right.
rotated over. That's another one to me of like, okay, this kid is this close to having something
Yeah.
break through. And if we can do it one time or
Yep.
2 times in a row, it'll set and we'll be good to go.
I,
Um,
yeah.
and yeah, I mean, my athletes see me all the time at practice. I mean, and they hear it in the film too. When they do something and I see something really good, I have some audible response of like, "Oh boy," or
Right.
something like that, just because it's like in my instinct kicks in and I'm like, "Okay, that's it. Like we gotta replicate that."
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you're talking about that. That's one of my favorite rants, of course. And then I did a thing for Jump Nation. It's coming up on 2 years now, but did a Zoom class on that, and they said, "What do you want to teach on?" And it was a cool week. They had other guests. They had Jeremy Fisher on, and the fact that they asked me, I was just amazed. And I'm like, "Yeah, I want to talk on too close to the bar at takeoff, how it screws up everything." And
Mm,
so, I went into a thing, but the thing that I'm finding, like you just mentioned, is, what I call the early layout people. So and sometimes it's forced upon them simply because they're
mm-hmm,
too close. When you're too close, man, you really got to do a lot of things in a hurry. You got to get the knee drive across, you got to get your arms up, and then you got to get them back down to your hips, because anything that's out in the way when you're too close is going to be problematic. So it's like, you're dealing with that and you do whatever. So most of the time I go, hey, I'd like you to ride your knee until you're somewhere around the bar. That would be nice. And the early head throwbackers, or the ones that are too close, or both, it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. If
mm-hmm,
they're throwing their head back in the middle of takeoff, then and some guys have really good flexibility through that rib cage. The upper spine has all kinds of mobility, for even, which is surprising because they're linked to your ribs, and you think, oh, my lumbar spine doesn't have the ribs attached, so I should be able to get my low back to do that. But that's where we got a lot of muscles and tightness sometimes. And then, getting the hips to be flexible is a whole nother thing, right? But when we get in this position, we're trying to rotate around. I'm like, dude, you're in a perfect position. I have no problem with your head back. I don't care anymore. Head back, eyes closed, eyes open, left side, right side. Like, I started studying Dontavius Hill a couple weeks ago, and I go,
mm-hmm.
throwing his head back to the wrong side. But then he did this high tight flip, and it seems to get the same kind of rotation. And I'm like, I remember almost being taught at one time never to do that. And I look at it and I'm like, Dontavius gets away with it, and so does Stephen Holm. I saw
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Holm jump 711. He's looking to over the wrong shoulder and he does that flip. And I'm like, okay, well, anybody jumps 711 doing something, it's viable. And
Yeah, it's
Dontavius jumped 4 1/4, and that's viable. So I'm like,
mm-hmm,
I got to change my opinion. But when you're talking about, that arch, I'm like, yeah, when you can see it, you're like, dude, this is perfect. But getting
mm-hmm,
it to where it's the perfect, what I call the slinky position, where your head and your feet are on the same level and you're still in that high bridge. So when you look at film and you see that their head and their feet are on the same level and they're in a chair, or they're in a
mm-hmm,
straight line and slightly better than a chair, the chair is the worst. But then you go, when you're up in the high bridge there, all you got to do is wait for your head to get the tiniest bit lower than your feet, and you're done. Like I had
Yeah.
this today doing the fallback drill, and one of the other coaches had taught him to snap his hips, like, and pull his feet forward, and I go, no, just wait. I go, I don't think you really have to do anything. At a certain point, when you start to spin, when you pull your feet, you'll just flip around on your stomach, So that was
Yeah,
my
I
wish list.
yeah, I mean those pit drills, I have my high jumpers do them almost every day, even not
Mhm.
on jump days. And when we do those back arches, they all do like to snap through the hips, and it's just like, no, you in this drill, I want you to feel like you're kicking your heels through.
Yes.
And I think I got it from I probably took a lot from you, but just when you think about them on a clock and they're at 9 and 3 and
Yep.
they want their head to just slightly be there. And
Yep.
then it's that kick through the heels to finish the rotation around. And
Yeah.
it's just that feeling of patience. And I talk about it all the time, the high jump paradox of like the higher the bar goes, the faster, more powerful we have to be in the approach. But then when we're up in the air, everything has to slow down. Your
Yes.
timing has to slow down. You have to go.
Yeah.
Speaking to the choir, I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just one
Yeah.
of those
Preach,
things
brother,
that.
preach. Yeah.
And so it's a weird thing, and I think I talk about this all the time with like tall high jumpers. You've jumped like a tall high jumper your entire life, where you can just go up to a bar and basically fall over.
Yes.
Now that we're up at 7 feet, it's like you actually have to get yourself up there before you can start,
Right.
rotating. And the chair thing was interesting because I was watching USA Championships. I think it was from last year or the year before. Um, Another guy that you'll have to kind of look out for that's got a very unique in-flight technique is Javon Harrison.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The double
Javon
both
Harrison,
knees up and then the pop.
he and then he snaps his hips. He has such the one thing I would say that he can do is he has such body awareness while in the air. You
Yeah.
watch his slow-mo jumps and he is spotting the bar the entire time,
Yep.
still rotating, and then he just snaps those hips.
Yeah.
Perfect time. And
He's waiting.
it's
Yeah.
incredible. It's incredible to watch. Like I saw him jump at Texas Relays last year. Just the speed at which he comes into the bar,
Yeah.
and then his flight time and just his patience is unreal. And all my high jumpers saw him and they're like, "Coach, we got to get faster on the apron." I'm like, "Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but he's been running that fast for a long time. Y'all
Right.
haven't even gotten to that point. We can't control that speed yet."
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but
That's a whole nother animal.
yeah, it's a whole nother animal, and just the different things. And I tell kids all the time, I'm like, if it's not broke, let's not fix it. Like if you're jumping national qualifier marks, I'm not gonna
Yeah.
mess with it. Like we'll
Yeah.
just keep working with what we're working on and fix some of the fundamental things, but that's it.
There's been a proliferation, I think, in the last few years of some pretty interesting layouts. Like the
Mhm.
kid from Oklahoma that won, he would pop
Oh
one
yeah, Vernon
and then the
Turner.
other. Yeah, he would go one hip and then the other, like he was doing a hitch, and through
Yep.
the and then Javon, I actually jumped against a guy in high school that did kind of the same thing.
Mhm.
And then I'm gonna send this to you if I can find it, or I'll just put you on the fact finding mission yourself. But I
Okay.
think it's 2017. It's the year after the Olympics. So Barshim had lost to Druin, and Bondarenko
Mhm.
would come in third, right? But when I look back at that, I remember thinking, God, Druin just kicked everybody's butt. But Barshim didn't miss until very late in that competition. They were both even. Druin just kept making everything on his first jump.
Mhm.
Bondarenko did his typical, opened at 4.5. I think he made that on his first, but then he started missing a few. But he always likes to, I think he's kind of a prima donna. Like he always wants to pass and be the only one jumping at that height, and then he's always got a shot at winning if he can make it. And then he wasn't quite on, and ended up with third. Well, when the tables flipped, they come back in 2017. Druin is retired, done, gone,
Mhm.
after a dominant performance in the Olympics. And then Barshim looked like he was on a mission. When I watched this
Mhm.
World Championship, it was like there was nobody in the arena that was going to beat him. He just wasn't missing. Everything was perfect. And Bondarenko opened at 4.5, went miss, miss, make, passes, right? He goes from 225 to what, 230. He skips 230, which is 6.5. And I think he went to 233, which is what, 7.5 or something. And he went miss, miss, miss. 6 jumps, 1 make, crap, right? And Bonder and Barshim was awesome. But here's the point of the story that's really interesting. There's this guy from Mexico that I had never seen. And he came around, and when he went up, it was almost like as he was going up, his head hit a stopper, and his feet inverted and came all the way up over his head. And he went over some things. Like when you watch it, I was like, I shook my head a couple times. I'm like, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? Because he was rotating up and over like a foot over when he got it right. When he got it wrong, his back would hit the bar off on the way up. But when he got it right, he had these just ridiculous clearances, like every bit as good as Barshim. I think he came in like 4th or something because they kept showing him, as you're going along. So it's 2017. I want to say, I don't know why it would pop into my head at this time, Edgar Sanchez, but I'm not sure. But
Okay.
never seen him before, and I was like, dang, dude, and it was a totally different style. It was like something, the kind of curiosity that I get is like, okay, what's the physics behind it? Why does it work? How did he come up with it? It's could be it just happened one time and they found a way to replicate it, right? I don't know because I haven't seen enough of the guy. Maybe it just happened on those jumps that night. I don't really know. But I found it really interesting. I'm like, oh man, viable, layout techniques. But I was going to bring this up because you were talking about, laying the groundwork, right? And sequential stuff. And you were saying, well, as long as you're, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And then, handling your approach speed and all that. So I get these kids, the high school kids, they come up, and this one kid today, Salim, he's a freshman basketball player. And he goes, Coach, I need you to help me with my form. And I've learned now that when they say that you need to help them with their form, they're talking about their layout. So, they look at other kids with better layouts and they're like, okay, I'm not doing that. I don't know how to do that. I don't know what's going on. So I'm like, look, I said, dude, right now, when I got you, you were a loppy basketball player who didn't know how to run. You shuffled your feet. I've gotten him up running. He's starting to cycle. And when he stays tall and cycles, he runs right off the ground, and heights are easy. When we get in trouble is when he starts thinking and he starts thinking and he starts doing weird stuff. Like today, I'm like, dude, are you a double arm or a single arm? He's like, double. I said, then could you get them both back, please? Like reach back and do, and he goes, well, should I do this one or this one? He shows me 2 perfect ones that we haven't done the whole day. I go, I would like either. If you want to do the whip back and then whip the other arm back and go, great. If you want to just, gather, and he literally walked 2 5-steps where he did both of them perfect. And I'm like, somebody must have shown him that before. Oh yeah, it was me. And then every jump, he's coming up in his one arm's in front, one's on back. He's reaching out to the side. He's, I'm like, dude, your arms are all over the place. I can't get you to work on your layout until you run consistently and hit your spot and get your arms back and drive your knee up. Then we can finish flying, and then I can teach you to lay out. I said, we're building a Sunday here, dude. We're on the first scoop. We're trying to finish, I go, we ran you through straight. We're getting you to run curves. So there's 2 scoops, and I'm like, maybe we're at the fudge point, but the cherry on top is the layout, and I keep trying to teach them, like, just drive that knee up. If you can get that knee up and over, I mean, your hips are the halfway point. Your knee is another third of you or something. I don't know. I don't know enough of the physics behind it, but that's what I keep talking about. But so hey, what about those pole vaulters? How are because you talked about wanting to get the high jumpers. So how are the pole doing?
It was interesting that you kind of brought up the whole, like, you work with, because I was working with some pretty good pole vaulters and had a pretty good system down at UVU. And I had that one kid who went from jumping 15.3 to 17, qualified for nationals as a freshman. Like, I was feeling pretty good. Like, oh yeah, I've started to get this kind of figured out. And then you shift into this whole nother, team and group that's been coached in a specific way, and they all come from different places. And it's almost just like resetting of like, okay, now I gotta figure out what their knowledge is, what they understand, how they think about the vault, how they've been coached in the vault, and just kind of kind of mesh what I understand and how I see it and my instinct with what they're
Hmm.
thinking and how they're understanding and what their process is. Um, I think I've done a pretty good job of just doing the best I can to be as individualistic as I can with each vaulter because you know, some of these kids very analytical, very just like take studious with taking notes. And if she listens to this, she'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
Like after every few jumps, writes down what her step was, what the correction was, what went well, just so that she can have this journaled and reference for later, and how many
Yeah.
jumps she took and what pulls. And it's just like, man, I'm glad you're writing all this down because that's something I try to
Yeah.
work on. But and then there's other kids where it's just like they can just go out, pick up a pole, get on their step, and just rep without missing a beat.
Yeah.
And so, for me at first, there was a lot of run throughs. There was a lot of just like gaps and things that we needed to continue to work on and fix so that they could get better. And
Hmm.
what's funny is I looked at film from the beginning of our indoor season, just kind of training, and half of them are just run throughs.
Yeah.
And then I looked at what we did at our indoor conference championship, and it was just like jump after jump after jump of just consistency, hitting the same mark, takeoffs look the same, and I it's one of the things I always tell athletes in the beginning is you can hate me now, but you're gonna love me when consistency kicks in and we start
Right.
hitting those bars and those jumps that we've wanted, and we're gonna get onto the poles that we know we need to get on.
Yeah.
Um, and this the cliche, which it's a cliche because it's true of just like you got to trust the process.
Yeah.
You may not see the end goal yet, and you may get super frustrated with why am I only working on approaches or why am I only working on this one piece, but it's setting you up for lots of other good things to come.
Yeah.
um, and so right now I have four pole vault boys and three pole vault girls. My two of my girls are seniors, and one of my males is a senior. And I mean, I came in with really big goals because I had seen film from them the previous years, and I was like, there's no reason why we can't be the most dominant pole vault crew in our conference and one of the best in the country
Hmm.
because of just they have the physical traits. Obviously, they train more so than a lot of other athletes because they have the military side of things of the mile runs, the push-ups, the pull-ups,
Yeah.
the abs, all that stuff. It's just so much more than any other group that I've seen. And
Yeah.
so I'm like all gung-ho. And but I came to the realization that like pole vault is just as much of a mental sport as it is the physical. You can have all the physical pieces and all of the physical things lined up and ready to go, but if the head is just not tuned
Yeah.
into your confidence and seeing what I'm seeing, then it doesn't matter how of great of shape you're in. You not
Yeah.
good things are going to happen. And so a lot of what indoor I was dealing with was just kind of building that confidence and showing them like, look, this is what I see and this is what you're doing right now. This is really, really good. And you just need to keep rolling with that and things are going
Yeah.
to start happening. Um, and so it's been good. We're starting to get to where we want to be or where we've needed to be as far as our marks. Now we're on the cusp of and going into outdoor where we're working on where we want to be, which is national qualifiers, school records, taking lots of spots at our conference
Right.
championship. So,
What do you think it looks like height wise? I remember the numbers. The only reason I remember is just because when I was my senior year, we had a freshman vaulter and a senior vaulter both make it
mhm.
at 17.4. So I don't know what the metric is, but it was 17.4 back in 1986. So is
So
change,
right
come
now
up, come down?
it's hovering around 17 feet, which is about five. Um, what do we? No, it's less than that actually. It's probably about 5'15", 5'13", which is just under 17, so 16'10",
Yeah.
16'11". It kind of depends on the year because for outdoor, it's top 48 in the East and the West.
Yeah.
And so we're shooting for that. Right now, I've got two guys that are pretty consistent. One, he's been kind of popping off the last couple of weeks. He PR'd for the first time since high school, which he's a junior now, so it's been a hot
Wow,
minute.
that's awesome.
Came out of high school jumping 5, and we finally got 505 twice. He's been attempting some big bars, so we should have him. And then the other one's the senior who's been kind of working his way back, been consistent around 5 meters, and we should be shooting up to that 515, 520 pretty quick. But our conference is fairly competitive. Our biggest rival is the Naval Academy, obviously.
Yeah.
They've got some good pole vaulters. They got a senior kid who's jumped. I think he jumped 524 in indoor. So he's pretty good. And then their girls, they've got one or two that are at the 4 meter mark, and then high 3 meters. So it's good competition. We do dual meets with them every indoor and outdoor, which are like massive deals. If we
Yeah,
were to beat them, it would be a huge deal on our campus and just for our athletes. We haven't since I've been here, and we haven't done it for a hot minute, I guess, at Army, just because Navy's got a good deep team. They have some athletes, and we're working our butts off to catch up to them. And we got close this last indoor season with our women, and so we'll see how outdoor turns out. But yeah, I mean, my goal is I have 4 guys. They all have the potential to be jumping over 5 meters, and that's kind of the expectation, hopefully at the end of the season.
Yeah.
And so that's just how I work. I see the potential, and maybe that's just comes from the coaching side, kind of like we talked about, the instinct and just
Right.
working with these athletes. But they may not be able to see it, but I think they're starting to believe it now that we've gotten through an indoor season, and they're like, okay, this crazy guy knows what he's talking about,
Right.
because we've seen things happen.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting outdoor. Hopefully the weather holds. We're going down to Florida for like 10 days at the end of the month, so we'll get some good meets.
Nice.
And then yeah, get out of the cold northeast weather.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We had a meet, one of my first year at Vanguard. I don't remember the other meets that much, but I remember the meet where we went to Point Loma. And Point Loma in San Diego is a beautiful campus. The track is right on the water. So you're looking out the end of the stadium, you can see the water. And if you walk off the track just a little bit, you can see off the cliffs down into the water. But it's gorgeous. But when we got there, there were all kinds of schools that I'd never seen before, and some of the names, I'm like, I just go right up to the athletes. I'm like, where are you from? These were usually pasty white people. So I was like, you got to be somewhere from back east, and you've been because they were rolling up their shirts every chance they got, get some sun, get a tan line, right? And you're like, so you've been freezing indoors for months, right? Yeah. So, and we're going to that meet this weekend. So this is like middle of March, and I'm sure I'm going to see some pasty white, belly, not fat bellies, but belly to soak up some sun. So yeah, when you said going down to the warm, I go, yeah, I've seen that before. That happens all the way up until April out here. Some of those, I don't know how long the winter lasts everywhere, but what was I going to tell you? There was I had an idea. You were talking about it and I'm going to beg you for your formula, because I find those things fascinating, especially for the length of the limbs and how wide the curve is, right? So, because it just recently occurred to me, we always measure from the standard, but I don't take off at the standard. I teach my go a good foot past the standard. Like the only guy I've seen that I think that could get away with being both out and behind the standard is Barsheen. But I haven't seen anybody else, because I hit the standard with my head one time when I was too close to it and a little behind. Far enough out, you got a chance you're going to go by it. But I'm like, now that I did it once, I'm like, I try to get my guys safely past that standard. I'm like, okay, if we're just a foot past this, I don't have to worry about it. I should be going over the middle, and I should not be flying out of the other end. So we're good, But the one thing that I'm curious about, and I was just thinking, what would be a great deal to lay out a track, a high jump area where you had maybe a foot by foot grid, from line the standards up on a line, and then have a checkerboard pattern, basically, of a foot this direction and a foot this direction. So you could literally walk out 12 feet, walk out, and eliminate all the measuring tapes. I hate measuring.
Yeah.
I hate it. I was like,
Yeah, it's such a pain. I've had athletes do this because, it's just the way it goes sometimes, but like everybody measures, everybody's got their marks, everybody's about ready to start jumping. And then a couple athletes run in late and they're like, oh, I got to measure
yeah,
out my steps. And it's like, oh, we're just holding up warm-ups now. But yeah, that'd be awesome. I trying to remember if I've seen it. I feel like I've seen where they have at least parallel with the pit, they have like from like 10 all the way up to 15, like there's lines that have been painted down. So at least you have the out figured out and then you just
yeah,
run it back. Um,
that would be
you
nice too.
know,
Yeah,
yeah, well, with how World Athletics is throwing out this whole like jumping zone thing for long jump, why don't we just start
crazy, right?
throwing it's crazy. I like how they want to innovate, but that's not it. I'm not a fan. Not a fan. I'm the same way as Carl Lewis. It's just that's
Yeah,
you're taking away a vital part of the event. Like, sure, a third of the
yeah,
scratches and pros have been, or a third of the pros have been scratching a third of their jumps or whatnot. It's like,
right,
okay, do better. Like,
right,
I don't know.
right. I know, right? And then so in tandem with, so
Mhm.
if anybody out there is listening and is a rich benefactor and you want to help a crazy high jump coach live his dream, I would like to have a camera on both, sides of the pit, left and right, just down the
Mhm.
bar, not straight down the bar. I'd like to be about 2 or 3 degrees over so I can see the side lean angle, right? I want to see the knee drive come across. I want to see how they're using their arms at takeoff. I can see a bunch of stuff from that angle. The other
Mhm.
one I find of interest is 90 degrees perpendicular. So I can see how they lean back. So I've got
Mhm.
side and back. I always teach them, I go, look, there's two leans. It doesn't look like it when you're doing it, but we're in a three-dimensional world and you're leaning in two directions. So
Yep.
I'm like, I need to see a lean back and a lean to the left or the right, depending which way you're going. Then I want a camera that's either a drone hovering or it's already mounted up on top so I can watch
Mhm.
the curve, right? So I can see those three things. The other thing I want, my rich benefactor out there is taking notes, force plates under the takeoff, right? One of the guys that I took my 3 different courses in at Cal State Long Beach, Dr. John Garhammer, one of the smartest people I've ever been in a room with. This guy is just like a rocket scientist, but I don't know how he did it. He got force plates under the lifts, the Olympic lifts in 1984 in Los Angeles. So he
Okay.
has, data from guys doing clean and jerk, all the big power lifts. So they had force
Mhm.
plates underneath there measuring their contact forces and the forces they generate, right? So I'm very curious about force produced and amount of time spent on the ground. So I want to have my force plates. And then the last thing that I really, really want are those trapeze or, back, any kind of a gymnast or more of an acrobat or even an aerialist where they have the ropes on them when they're doing flips
Mhm.
and you can pull on the ropes and suspend them so that if they're out of position, they don't get hurt, right? Or something like
Yeah.
that. And I go, because I've seen guys, some of the bouncier types that are good at body control, you see guys and girls that can jump and do that backflip and spin all the way around and land on their stomachs. And I'm like, that's it. Because if you
I
watch,
have my group do that every
yeah,
day.
right. Now I
Mhm.
couldn't even demonstrate that. I remember jumping into pools and doing backflips, but I'd never done it on the pit. But maybe with a spotter, you start to figure out, and I'm okay with that. But
Mhm.
I'm like, that was my whole thing. Like I said, if I get your head lower than your feet, if you hold it to that point, you should just spin, and you don't
Mhm.
really have to pull. I go, if you can stay in that position, that's the other thing I teach everybody about that. You brought it up with Javon Harrison and
Mhm.
his visual checklist, right? And I think I can see Barshim. I swear it looks like he's waiting till he can see down the bar. And when he can see down the bar, he knows it's time to throw his head back.
Yep.
And there's a time lag there anyway. So if you can see down the bar and you go, oh, now, by the time you make that decision, your head will be past it and your head can go straight down, your hips can come up, right? And you're in that position. So it's like, and I tell the kids, I go, look, straight, curve, takeoff, flight, layup. I go, every time the bar goes up, unless you're, I, and I can honestly say I saw this in person because I got a chance to jump against Sotomayor right after he broke the world record. So he came to UCLA and I was a grad, so I got to be in the meet, which was cool. Hollis Conway was there, Lee Balkin, some big names, and
Mhm.
Brian Stanton, who was on an Olympic team in '88. I got to jump against Hollis twice, I guess, because I got to meet him at NC2As my senior year. He was way better than I was, obviously, jumped 7 quarter. But, just being in the same place was cool. But Sotomayor came in just so cocky and confident because he just broken the world record. And I have never seen anybody convert straight up better in my life. So he came around, he opened at 7.2, and every jump, no kidding, was the same. It was this, and this. 2, 4, 6, 8. Boom, 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 boom. First jump at 7.10, same height, and somehow he kicked it off with his heels. And then he either passed and stopped or took 2 more jumps, but I think he just stopped. And I've never seen a better sequence because the 5 jumps were all exactly the same. But for most of us humans, as you go up, your flight time increases. Yeah, I was going to say that I thought all of those jumps that he did were the same. But, as the bar goes up, I'm like, basically your straight and your curve may both speed up and shorten in overall time if you're moving faster, covering the same ground. Now, maybe you're moving faster and covering longer ground, which could be, but in a relative sense, they're either staying the same or maybe getting quicker, right? And your takeoff time on the ground, you're moving faster, but you're sticking your leg out a little bit more. So again, maybe it's breaking about even, maybe a little bit more time on the ground. But I mean, comparatively, I go, the flight is the phase that's getting longer as you're getting better. You get better as a high jumper, you're getting better as a pole vaulter. Your flight is going to be a lot longer and longer. And you have to learn how to delay your layout. It's going to have to wait. You can't do it right as you're leaving the ground. You're going to have to learn how to wait. So I always tell them, I go, if you can figure out when to initiate your layout, I said your layout should always be roughly the same. Now sometimes you can see guys went a little early, and that's that thing where they go, oh, if I could have only held it longer. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And since you started it, then you're forced to hold it longer, and you're really gonna have to wait to get all the way around, and usually run out of time. That's why I said you got to wait longer. But if they wait to the same every time, I go, you don't have to hold those killer back bridges that long.
Yeah. Well, and two, you're talking about just if you have like a visual aid to use every single time, no matter where the bar's at, you're going to wait for that visual like cue of like, okay, now's my time to go. I think that a lot of kids that lean in early, they're just going off of muscle memory and like memorized time, right? And that's one of the things that, at least with my high jump group, I'm really trying to put an emphasis on the last couple of weeks of just like we gotta get away from just trying to rush over the bar. And it's it could be bad habits, or it's just we've always done it this way because this is how I was taught to do it.
Right.
These kids are trying to rush to get to the pit and get over the bar because they don't realize like, oh, if I jump up and then get my shoulders or my head or my eyes or whatever it is to that mark, and then I can rotate every time. Like you said, it's going to look the same height every single time, and you'll be like, oh, it's the same, but really it's increasing because your timing and everything is starting to change. And that's a interesting, like, I'm definitely probably going to steal that and use that this week, just because visual cues are, no matter where you go, where you jump, it's the bar and the cross, or the standards in the bar. So that's actually something that I'll probably use, because
I don't want to take credit for that either, because my last coach in 1992, I was trying for the last time to make the trials. I was 28, and I got a new coach who was Doug Nordquist's old coach, Alan Hankel. And Alan, if you're out there, love you, brother. He's a great coach. Got Doug Nordquist to jump 236 on a reconstructed ACL on his left leg. It was a cadaver replacement.
Dang.
less than a year after, right? They just stapled it in there and roughed it up a little, and he came back and jumped 236. And if you ever got a chance to see Doug in his heyday, he's a 6'5" antelope, just super fast, lean to the left more than anybody you've ever seen. Looked like a 45, and hit that takeoff. So, but one of the things that Alan was trying to teach me to do was to get my eyes off the bar. And I've realized the wisdom in this is when I get my kids to do what I call a boomerang approach. I stole those from
Mm.
Nordquist. I watched Doug Nordquist run one of those, but he would run in, drop into this curve, and where you're watching, just like, man, I've never seen anything like that before. And he would go, and he would do a complete 180 and come back out, and it would look like a perfect mirror image, and your hair would go blowing back because he's coming by such high speed, and you're like, man, I've never seen anybody run that fast, lean that far to the left. Because if you're not hauling and you lean that hard, you're either going to fall over or it's going to happen. So, I teach them that. I go, hey, when we're running now, when you look at the film, you can stand right there and have them run circles by you and catch it from two sides if you want. You can catch them coming in and catch them leaving on a circle if you pick the right spot. So I'm like, see where you are here? See where you are here? That's really, really good. We want to stay in that lane. Well, it's easy to do when you're running the circle and you're not going to jump. So I felt they're coming by doing those boomerangs, and I go, look at this. You're like 30 degrees here. This is ideal. I go, if you learn there. But I said, why are you leaning like that? And they're all coming up with different things. And I said, I'm going to tell you why it is. And you tilt them this when you look, you say, what are you looking at? And they're looking at the curve. They're not looking at the bar. They're not even getting ready to jump because they're busy to run, which is, they're trying to run, which is just like doing a run through. They're never ready to actually jump on a run through unless you pause very, because you just fling your arms back. It's like, so I go, hey, what is the key thing here? The lean is exactly what we want. You're even hitting on your feet and rolling across and back and across, just like you watch that Stephen Holm video. It's like, it's perfect. Like, you're doing everything we need to do. What is the one thing we're not doing when we actually jump? And they're like, oh, I'm looking at the bar. I said, yeah, because when you're here, I think as soon as I tilt my head to look at the bar, I've already started a cascade. It's just, here we go. So I'm like, and I thought back and I go, you know what? Alan was trying to get me to look at the far standard. And it was a struggle because I was 28 years old and I've been jumping since I was 12. So I tell everybody all the time, I want to write a book on how people learn things, because I go, some of the oldest adages are true. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Old habits are hard to break. Those both, I find them so true. And sometimes I'm like really jealous about getting the first 5 or 6 jumps with an athlete, and I'm tempted sometimes to put the bar up higher. You don't want to destroy them and have them jump and land on it, which is the only reason I don't do it. But there's times I'm like, I want to keep them from just bailing across, because it's, if the bar is really low, you can let your upper body go across and it's not going to hit anything. And think right away, some people are pretty good at that. And all of a sudden you've created this early layout monster within 2 or 3 reps, because they're having success. They do 3, 4, 5 bars in a row, and they're like, oh, that's how you do it. Like, no. Drive the knee up, do this. And it's like, it's already doesn't make sense, because, the brain learns so fast and it stores those programs. And when you say, hey, try this, your brain goes, oh, you must mean this. We just did this 5 seconds ago. And it repeats perfectly, and you're like, oh, God.
Yeah, so I do the same thing with my group when we're doing backovers. Obviously we start low, but when they start getting the upward motion and the holding of the rotation, I'm like, okay, awesome. Let's jack that thing back up. Like,
yeah,
because we just got to continue to work on like that feeling of just like patience and floating. And all of my high jumpers now I don't know if all of them hate it, but my multis especially hate it, doing like a 1-step jump into the pit, because really it takes out all the speed of your approach. It takes out all of the things that could hide the bad form and technique. And it's like, okay, you get 1 step and then you got to work on all your technique to get your body up and over. And
knee drive across, arms up, ride the knee, everything.
Exactly. And
body
so
lean. Yeah,
when they start feeling good with it and they're like, oh yeah, look at me, I'm repping this out. I'm like, okay, let's put it up. Like, if you want to start feeling good, let's start feeling good. And I'm always trying to push the limit of what they can do in practice, because you said it at kind of the beginning of the conversation of like, they fall back onto what they've been trained to do and what they practice. And
Yeah.
so for me, I'm a big believer, like, yes, we need to do bar work in practice. If you can do it over a bungee, you can do it over a bar. That's just my personal mentality.
Yeah.
That's just, if you're this far over the bungee, you're this far over the bar. If you're
Yep.
touching the bungee, you're touching the bar. But it's just developing that mentality of like, yeah, we can throw this higher. Like, I'm going to attack it the same way every single time. I'm not going to get intimidated. And because a lot of times when they're doing really well with a low bar or a bungee, you throw a bar up a little bit higher and
Yeah.
everything reverts back to just bad habits because it's just like they start thinking and they
Yeah.
just, so it's always just testing that limit and pushing them to that limit. And you're right, you do have to kind of find that line of like, am I pushing it too much? Is this going to turn into a bad jump day?
Yeah.
Or do I just let them ride this out and find consistency at this lower height?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of finding that balance, and you kind of, I guess, have to establish those goals, beforehand
Yeah.
of like, what's the goal of practice today? Are we repping stuff or are we pushing the limit today? So
Yeah, and that's a tough one, especially for the high jumpers. Like you said, I go, well, if you guys PR'd every day, you'd be jumping 8 feet. It's like, it's really impossible to do. And the young kids, they just want to jump at a high bar, high bar. And I'm like, you don't understand. If you just go and you give maximal effort on crappy technique because you're trying so hard, I go, that's good. I need the speed, I need the effort and everything else, but you still have to execute. So,
mm,
there's real wisdom in what you're doing there, Mike. Elias, my little my Romanian Yoda, I call him.
mm,
He was the jump coach at Long Beach City, and he coached the aforementioned Brian Stanton to the Olympic team in 1988 in Seoul. He jumped 7'8". He had another guy named Dennis Lewis who jumped 7'8" and a quarter, which is not a legal height. There's a big story behind that one. I'll tell you sometime. But
dang.
he jumped 8 and a quarter. He got 8, and then I think I might have been his third highest jumper. But he had a lot of long and triple jumpers. Great jumper. So anyway, he from the first time that I started working with him, the only thing he did not do, and I don't know if you've seen it on my site, but it sounds like you might have used it already. Sometimes I'll even have them do what I call the 0 step, where they put that
Mm,
leg on the ground, right leg is back. And if you're going to do double arm, your both arms are back. If you're a single, you're already like this. And you go through from no speed to 0, right? And that is one thing that I found really interesting and not easy at all. I've tried it. I
no.
did the drill and I thought it was a great idea. And for a long time, I was watching they're struggling. And, what do they do first? That the left foot's on the ground, the right foot's back. And what do? They lean forward onto the left and dive hard to the right. And I'm like I go, wait a minute. If you were running and you went right and then you stepped with your left foot, I go, what's next? And they go, you're right. I said, yes, your right foot, your knee drive. Get off of that leg and drive your knee. Don't bend the left leg and try to jump off your left leg with no knee drive. That doesn't make any sense. So anyway, it goes 0s, 1s, 3s, 5s. You work your way back. And part of the reason, I'm not sure if it was genius on his part or if it was because we had such a crappy pit there at Long Beach City. But I went down to work with him my senior year when I was at UCLA. So I was driving down to Long Beach to work with him. And it wasn't a great area, but the apron was good enough to do the short stuff. So I think part of it might have been that. But the one part about the wisdom of it was, like you said, it's easier in a lot of ways to control the speed. But then you don't have as much speed as you need to jump really high. But then what I found was when you get your technique down and you start making heights, if you can one step, like I don't know, I don't even remember what my best one step was, but it wasn't bad. And I remember a 3-step of at least 6'3" or 6'6" at some time in my career. And when you start making heights like that from short approaches, it gives you nothing but confidence. So that's what I need to come up with a sheet. I'm going to give all of them a sheet from now on. It's literally backovers, 0s, 1s, 3s, 5s, and anything that you can make a height at, you can make a new PR at, because everybody likes PRing. So that gives you a wealth of things that they can actually be getting better at that might not necessarily be their own personal best in the event, but that is a strong correlator. Like if you're going along and you're getting PRs and everything, and I go, now here's the interesting part. I said, if you can PR in practice, that's one thing. I say, but on meet, when you're doing your warm up, because I teach them, I go, your warm up should be the same as a workout. I said, what do we do? You jog 2 laps, you do your A's and B's and C's, you do some agilities, you do this, you do that, all active, blah, blah, blah. Then we start doing our run throughs. We do a couple of boomerangs, you do this. I go, you do a couple of backovers. I go, if the referees let you just go and do what you want to do it. If they don't, we'll modify, but it's like, once they're starting to let you go at the bar, you don't have to do a full approach. You can say, can I put the bar down to 6 feet and do a 3-step? You can do whatever you want. So, but you'll find, I said, what's the big difference on meet day? Adrenaline. You got some juice.
Yep.
So all of a sudden on meet day, maybe you 3-step 6-6 for the first time, and it's like, oh man, I'm rocking, and it's like, I go, every time you get a new PR, it's like a little bit of an uplift, right? Those are good days. So yeah, I like that, what you said, because that of course lines up with what I said. But that was something that I was taught early. I didn't know I was being taught that even by a life. That was just like, I didn't even realize when I first started coaching that I was doing the same things. It was almost like a pattern. I was just like, well, let's do some backovers. Okay, let's move back. Now I've come up with some modifications. So have you tried those legged backovers yet? Have you seen those?
Which ones?
I have them do the standing 2-legged backover first, but then I'll put them on one leg. So I me first before they do anything else and pop the
I know
hip.
I had Aiden do them last year. I can't remember if I don't know if I've had my group do them this year. I know I've had them do them just like as a warm up onto the pit, but this is probably the perfect time to start throwing them in because that single leg, like it really makes you like be dedicated to the arms and the knee drive and all just the patience. Yeah. I mean, 2 legs, when do we jump off 2 legs? So it's a good warm up. It's a good thing to get the rotation, but like it's all single leg stuff. But yeah, it's good to know that I'm still the way I think and the way I set things up still resonates true where we go 1 steps, 3 steps, 5s, and then we work back to our fulls every practice. And then in meets, I that's what I encourage them to do too, of like, if we've got time, well, let's take 1s, let's take 2s, let's even do some backovers if we can. Like if nobody's jumping and people are running marks out and we can't get on, just do backovers over the bungee. And I think it's a good warm up. It gets the body flowing. If you're having good 3s, you're going to have good fulls. But I think too, it just gets you in if you're training the right way and you're practicing with the competitiveness and the same like killer mentality, you're going to tap into that when you get into a meet, and then the meet becomes less all about the stadium and the competitors and more about like, this is just me doing my thing. Like, I tell them all the time, like, competition's the easy part. Competition's the fun part. Training is supposed to be hard. You're going to have more bad jump days at practice than you're going to have good jump days at practice. But you're setting yourself up to have great competition and consistency. Like for me, especially at the college level, like if you're just a one eventer, if you're just a pure high jumper, the business of how track and field works is most teams have a roster cap of who they can take to conference championships. And if you just think about the strategy of it, who's going to get valued more? A guy that can do 3 events, really well and potentially score, or one guy that has 1 great mark in high jump, but the rest of them are no heights or low marks or whatnot. But as a high jumper, if you go out and you're consistently hitting, 201, 205, 206, 207, 205, you're showing that you can go out to any meet, any time and hit this mark, and you're going to put you in a position to be competitive. And it's the same with pole vault. Pole vault, I always relate them to being like the kickers or the specialty people from a football team. Because that's really all they do. And so when it's your time to shine, it's your time to shine. You got to be able to replicate good stuff every single time, because then when I go into a coach's meeting and we're deciding who's going to be on the roster, it's like, okay, I know athlete A, athlete B, athlete C, they've hit this mark every single time or have been around this every single time. They are on this conference list because I know they're going to take top 8 and score points. Whereas, somebody who's, hey,
might
I
have
jumped
potentially higher
208 one time, and then the rest it's been no height or 195 or something. So just a little nugget of information for all those like high school high jumpers that, it's okay to be a one eventer. Just realize that you have to be very consistent and
Yeah.
you've got to be able to perform and maximize your opportunity.
Yeah.
Um,
No, you're right. I
Also,
mean,
do multiple events.
yeah. Yeah. Good lesson there. Yeah. That was the one thing that it didn't escape me, but I didn't have any talent. So they, they never came to me at UCLA and said, can you try something else too? We really need you to do this. It's like, no, 22 foot long jumpers. No, a 40, I don't never did the triple. I don't think I could have touched 40 feet when I was in great shape. So yeah, it wasn't going to happen. I was a slow white guy with hops. That was it. But what was it? The wisdom of what you're saying there, it makes a lot of sense. And then the other thing that I was thinking of was when we were talking about the eyes and the bar and everything. I want to start doing more of these, and I got to either get higher standards or just put them up, as high as I can. And I want to get them to do. You were talking about run throughs. I think one of my weaknesses as a coach is I do run throughs all the time, but I get bored quickly, and I need to stay on them longer.
I
But
do
I
too.
don't I don't like I don't like the run throughs by the pits unless they're doing the boomerangs because a lot of times
Mhm.
they slow down and they veer off. And I'm like, no, 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 you gotta really drop into that. I'd almost rather run circles. So run
Mhm.
straight, drop into a circle and do that. But it's like, okay, what I want to start having them do is, and I've done it a few times, put the standards away from the pit somewhere, get them out by themselves and jack the bar up and have them run and then jump up, at the takeoff. Go ahead and do a full blown pop up where you don't have to
Mhm.
worry about crashing into the pits, but you're also not going to land on your back because there's no pits.
Mhm.
You just hit straight up. It's almost like doing a scissor or whatever.
Mhm.
I just saw, of course, I didn't invent it. I saw it on an Instagram where a guy, I think I posted it. The guy just asked me to repost his video. One of the many Indian jumpers over there that
Mhm.
are really into what they're doing. But this guy was really fast. He took off far out and he jumped up and then he just kind of turned and then ducked as he went under the bar and then, kept going. And I was like, okay, I kind of like that because he's going up. And, we used to do five-step pop-ups. I remember the first time I jumped at 225. I got a couple jumps in my career at 225. So I remember running up and doing a pop up from way out because I didn't even want to come close to crossing the plane and losing a jump. But I would jump up and like everybody does, you try to get your head, and your shoulders, and your hips, as high as you can up over the bar and looking down in the pit, like, oh yeah, I could get over that, and then you would do your thing. There's a lot of value in that just because of the knee ride, drive that knee up, leave it up, and get all the way up there kind of thing. So it's just like a mental note to self. Like,
Yeah, and actually, now that you remind me, one of my high jumpers the other day talked about like, hey, what we could do? We have because there's a basketball court in the middle of like our indoor track, and
right.
there's hoops, and it's like, why don't we just work on like doing backboard touches from like a 5-step approach? And I'm like,
Yep.
that's not a half bad idea of like just getting up, trying to touch as high as you can on the backboard.
Yeah.
Just because it's gonna mimic that movement and that drive up to
Yeah.
get to that height as opposed to like always just thinking, oh, I gotta rotate early, I gotta do
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think you're definitely onto something, and that's probably something I'll be implementing too.
Reverse dunking, obviously if they can dunk, throwing
Hmm.
reverse is pretty similar. And then
Yeah.
this is something that I lucked onto. I had a young kid drive down all the way from Ventura down into to Garden Grove. So it was a couple hour drive. The parents can't find anybody out that way.
Mm.
And that's part of the reason why my business is successful because nobody's doing it or they're too far away. So they came down to see me, and for some reason, it rarely happens here in Southern California, but it was started to pour rain. So I took them inside, we dried off, we went in the basketball gym, and I'm trying to find something to do. And I'm like, well, we can run down the sideline here and run some curls, this, and I'm like, wait a minute, here's this 3-point line.
Hmm.
And the 3-point line, it's flat on the end, and then it's a perfect half circle. And I'm like, well, why don't we just run down this thing and drop into the curve and run around? So we were just we're just running, over here and just, do the big whole thing. And now it's obviously a little bit wider, but what I liked about it was there was a very easy transition line into a perfect half circle where you could run straight. And I go, all we got to do is figure out how to get your right foot to hit here. And then you can drop in with your left foot and run, So if I had what you're saying, sounds like the dream scenario to me of, if I had all my other camera angles in the pits and then we put the basketball court right next to it, and then we can bring Jordan, the jump man,
Yeah.
Les Westner, the dunk man. Have you seen that guy take off from behind the free throw line yet?
Yep.
Oh, I'm hoping he's going to make it to the trials. I haven't really heard anything or seen anything of him this year. Last time
we'll see.
He moved from Ohio or something to like Florida State or something.
I think so. I can't
like
remember.
That in 2021. So on three years later, I'm getting excited for that. Well, hey, Mike, it's always a blast, brother, talking to you. I gotta make my way out there, man. I want to. We gotta shake hands and see what's going on. But
yeah, for sure.
You guys ever end up out this way? What? Now that you your whole family over there.
Yeah, they actually used to do their spring break trip down to Long Beach, but their spring break got moved later into March, and so now we go to Florida. So this is the first year they've gone to Florida. This last year they went to Long Beach, yeah. So I was kind of bummed.
Yeah, that's right in the backyard.
Yeah, we'll have to figure something out. I've got some things kind of cooking up this summer as far as like camps and things that I'm going to try and see if I can work and go to, but if I can make it out that way, I'll do the best I can. Or if you're out this way,
we got to talk it
just let me know.
I don't mind getting out that way either. I wouldn't, especially on a stopover on the way over the pond or something,
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
All right, sir. Well, hey, keep sending videos.
I will.
And I love hearing how your brain thinks, especially I want to take that and, mold right into the pole vault stuff because I'm still a very young tyro, coach. So I actually had someone asking me today if they thought, what do you think about, competing? And I'm like, man, I'm 60. I just turned 60. I'm like, I don't want to jump. I don't want to high jump and jump 5 feet, and be excited about it, It's like,
now that you say so we actually had a home meet for indoor and it was like a small, like prep, like tune-up meet for conference championships. And I was just like, you know what? Like, let me throw my spikes on. Let me grab a pole. I had jumped a couple of times at practice just to kind of, So I went for it. And my mistake was I should have gone from a 5-step because a 7-step, I went through all of warm up and I was just like gassed. I was like, this is not good. So I no-heighted, but it was good. Like I try to do stuff like that just because pole vault's such a mental sport. And sometimes these kids just get so wrapped up in like the intensity of like trying to do these things.
Right.
And they just start thinking too much. And I'm competitive. I used to be, and I tell them all the time, I was like, I never ran through. And some of my other coaches may be like, no, that was a lie. But I feel like I never ran through. I was pretty consistent.
Yeah.
And I feel like that rings true because I can grab a pole, guess a 3-step, take a 3-step up, measure out my 5, like run it back one time. And then I'm just like dead on pretty much every single time. And they're all just like, what? Like, it's like riding a bike. It just comes back to you and you have the timing down and you just, I don't know. I tell my athletes all the time, I'm just crazy. Like, I really just have too many bolts loose in my brain that I'm just like, I can go out and do this no problem. Like, give me the right pole. I'll make it happen. So I feel you.
The impetus behind it is, at least, I do envy other coaches that can look at things and just kind of come up with something that you should do or a drill or whatever. The only 2 events that I did in high school that were the high jump and the pole vault. So those are the only things. I did the long jump a little bit, before I started high jumping when I was 12. So, and I was okay. I could always jump over, I could jump long, I could do whatever. But, once I was good at the high jump, it became especially, but I almost gave up high jumping for pole vaulting. So the only thing that I'm thinking is I need to go to see like Anthony Curran, he's still
Hmm.
doing clinics. And, then, I could have the goal. I vaulted 11.6. I'm sure I'm not gonna be able to do that now, but I don't know. Maybe if I
You
train,
never know.
learn, yeah, and that gives me because I really want to be able to speak from experience and not just
Mhm.
I do want to learn all the things that go along with. So it's like, and unfortunately, we just didn't have a pole vault coach when I was in high school. They had the poles, the pits were out. I had a good vaulter in front of me. He was trained by his dad, Dick Tomlinson. Dave Tomlinson was like a 15 and a half foot vaulter in high school and went to Boise State, became a decathlete. And, I know he was good at what he did, but nobody was ever teaching us. He was training with his dad somewhere else, and so
Mhm.
I did it my senior year. I don't even know what the heck I was doing. Coming back down the runway one time, after going up and turning around, going, what the heck? And like I landed on my ankle and rolled it. So it cost me like
Mhm.
3 weeks. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something to shoot for. So
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, there's guys out there that are pole vaulting still that are probably around your same age. I mean, I'm trying to think because I remember watching this guy. He probably jumped like 13, 13, 6, 14, and I mean, much, much older than me. And I was just like, this is wild.
yeah,
But I mean, if you can jump high enough and you get onto the right pole and you just kind of,
yeah,
have that high jump surfer mentality of just kind of send it,
yeah, absolutely.
well, you'll make it happen. And I was kind of the same way as you. Like I grew up kind of in Vancouver, Washington. I had a high jump or pole vault coach. I had a club coach while I was there, and my family moved to Utah. And so junior, senior year, I was in Utah. We had poles in a pit, but no coach. And so I was, there was a kid that was a senior my junior year, so I trained with him a little bit. We had a coach come in every so often. Then my senior year, I was all by myself, and it
Yeah,
was just like my mom would show up with a camcorder. This was before cell phones had
yeah, yeah,
an Instagram and YouTube, and I'm just like watching myself trying to figure this out. And
yeah,
I tell recruits that story all the time, and I talk to my athletes about that, and I think that's where like my just inner like motivation kind of came from of like I don't have a coach. There's this kid down the street that is right there comparable to me, and I'm jumping just as well as him, and I'm like I'm gonna jump better than him. Like, and I just had this chip on my shoulder
yeah.
all the time. And I tell my athletes all the time, like as a coach, I've kind of like reined that in, but every so often, like hockey coach Mike comes out and it gets real. So
Awesome. All right, Mike. Well, hey, it's always a pleasure, bud.
yep,
We'll
yeah,
stay
it's
in
great.
touch. Let me know how it goes at these
I
big
will.
meets, especially the duel. I kind of miss dual meets. It was
Yeah,
cool. You guys have this big, both indoor and out too. That's kind of cool.
it's such a different it's a different experience. It's
Yeah.
so intense and so competitive, and I love it. Like I'm all about it, and the athletes get really into it, and it gets there's been a
Yeah.
couple of times where things have gotten just a little bit too heated for me, but for the most part it's pretty
Yeah.
awesome. Like it's such a cool experience to have something in the season that really, really matters and that we train for and that we can put our hat on. And then
Yeah.
obviously conference championships and postseason too. So, but
Does
yeah,
it, does it
I'll
get as
I'll
big
let you
as
know.
does it get as big as football?
Oh yeah, I would say so. It gets it's pretty good. Like it's
Yeah.
pretty intense. Like
Yeah.
I kind of had an idea of what I thought it would be like when I went to this, but it's a whole different level. Like we're hosting it this time. We were at Navy for indoor. We're hosting the outdoor one. So
Okay.
it'll be it's wild. It's really all I can say without getting too into the weeds about it. But I'm
Yeah.
excited for it. My group's always super excited. Great performances always happen,
Yeah.
and so it'll be good. I'm really excited to see how it goes, and I'll definitely keep you in the loop with how high jump's going. And we've got some
Awesome.
really good kids doing some good things. So hopefully we'll see some national qualifiers there. Got a kid that he has potential and has put himself he's actually attempted 220 221.
Right.
223 is the Olympic A standard to get himself automatic into the trials, so that's the goal. So we'll see
Yeah.
what we can do, and hopefully we'll be out there.
Awesome. All right, Mike. Well, hey,
All
you
right.
have a good one. Get some
Yep, you
sleep.
too.
I kept you up late, and
No, you're good.
All right. Thanks
Okay.
for being
All
on
right.
again,
Yep.
man. Always
Yeah,
fun.
for sure. We'll
All
talk
right.
later.
All right, Mike.
All right. Bye.
Bye. And that's going to wrap it up here on another episode of Raise the Bar. We just got through speaking with Mike Ashton. He was formerly at Utah Valley, and this year has moved to the Army. He's at West Point. So he's doing the same jobs as you heard, and we always have a lot of fun talking. Mike and I, one of my former jumpers out here in California, Aiden Garnett, went to state his senior year and came in sixth, but he became the first one of all the jumpers that I coached in high school. Once he left to go to college, who jumped 7 feet, the first one, and he did it the very next year. So he was a 6'7" jumper in high school. And then he went to Utah Valley and jumped 7 feet and won the WAC indoor, I think, his freshman year. And then he went on a 2-year mission with the Mormons. And then he came back. And that's when he got to start jumping with Mike. So that was a connection between Mike and myself early that first year. And now Mike has changed venues, but he's doing the same jobs. You know, he was a great pole vaulter. He high jumped. He understands the jumps and, you know, how to get people off the ground and, you know, how to do drills. And, you know, we have very similar mindset. So it's always fun to bounce ideas off him. So thanks again to Mike Ashton of West Point, the Army. And we will be talking with you again soon here. We've got more guests planned and hoping to continue to be on a roll. I have some more rants planned. Sometimes they just happen. So stay tuned. When you get a chance, check out Sky High and Fly Jump Lab. We've changed our name. We are still on Instagram, growing a little bit all the time, and still would like to post, you know, athletes from my athletes, obviously, that I'm working with, but also, you know, athletes from the US, athletes from around the world, promoting track and field, both here, you know, locally, nationally, and internationally, worldwide. Love to see track and field continue to get better and better, hopefully. It's an Olympic year, and you know, it's just a great time to be around doing all this stuff. So we've got things planned, like we talked about earlier. There's new things on the website. That would be Zoom classes, and we have downloadable content, all kinds of new bells and whistles. So stay tuned. Until next time, this is Troy Haines, formerly of UCLA, now longtime coach, signing off from another episode of Raise the Bar. Thanks for listening.